Here I've got my transfer cases set down on the ground on the grip pan, ready to rebuild. I'm going to take the two of them and combine them into one. So this one came on the ZF6. This one I bought off an automatic, but the input splines for this one are a 31 spline. For this one, they're a 34 spline. So I've got to take this input shaft out, put it in that case because I want a manual shift, not an electric shift. So I'm going to combine the best of the parts on the inside and make one good one. I also have a rebuild kit and gasket kit, so that'll help me out. I won't have to reuse bearings and seals, but I'm just going to get to it. I've already got the tail housing off of that one, the rear output yoke, the oil pump. I'm waiting on a set of snap ring pliers that I ordered so I can really start digging into that one all the way. I'm going to start doing this one. I'll catch you guys back up in a little bit. Here I've got the transfer case split and ready for disassembly. This is the planetary out of the good transfer case that I was going to reuse. I did start taking the transfer case apart, and all the parts are on the bench ready for cleaning and inspection, so I can decide which ones I want to use. I did find some RTV near the pickup for the oil pump because whoever was in here last used way too much and it squeezed out into the actual transfer case and the chain ripped it off. Here's the two tail cones. One of them I broke, but I'll use the other one. I put the parts on my trailer deck and power washed them, cleaned them up, and then it was time to start reassembling. I put new bearings in each case half, the main bearings, and all the little ancillary bearings. I put a new transfer case chain in, but I didn't put a new sprocket in. I didn't think that it needed it. They both look good. I did put a new seal for the shift fork in. That was a little difficult, but not too terribly hard. It was just time consuming. I will clean up that piece and paint it, but I just hadn't done it yet at this point. I had the main shaft back in and the transfer case halves put together. I was waiting to put the cone on until I put it on the truck. Before I could put it on the truck, I had to install the new tail housing for the ZF6, and then I could put the transfer case on here. I waited to put the yokes on until it was on the truck so that I could torque them down and use the engine to hold them. After I had it in the truck, it was time to start building my transmission crossmember, which I have right here. I was marking out where to drill the holes for the transmission mount studs, and then I could make them into ovals so that I would have a little bit of adjustment here. Then I bent some tabs down and reinforced it. I'm building this crossmember out of 6" by 2" by 3/16 steel. Here I've got my transmission crossmember, just the beginning of it. As you can see, I made 2 slotted holes right here and here for the trans mount, and then since it's 2" by 6" rectangle tube, 3/16 wall, the studs on the trans stud or trans mount aren't long enough to poke all the way through the other side. So I made these 2 flaps, knocked them in. I'm going to weld them here, up in here. I'm going to weld it all in, but that just gives it a little extra support. I don't think it'll need it. It's plenty strong already, but I'd like to overbuild things. And then I put 2 1/4" pieces right here to stiffen it up. I didn't have any scrap 3/16 laying around. I didn't feel like cutting up a big plate of it, so I'm gonna get this tacked up, weld it together, and then I'll start making the rest of it. I cut it here short because I got to make a drop for the front drive shaft so it doesn't hit the cross member, but making good progress. Here's the area of the trans mount all welded up. There is some porosity in the welds in some places. You could probably see. I did go back through and grind those out and re-weld them. Here I'm building the passenger side attachment bracket to the frame. And here's the crossmember almost done. I will cap the ends, as you'll see here. I capped them with some 1/4" thick by 2" flat bar and just fully welded them in. I did clean off all the rust beforehand. Here it is bolted into the truck with trans sitting in it. I was copying the Carrot Customs mount for a ZF6, and it's close, but it's a little different. Here I got the hole for the ZF6 shifter cut in the trans floor pan cover, As you can see towards the back, I did have to radius it a bit so it would clear the trans. I was able to fit the stock Dodge AC compressor in the stock location on the Cummins. I have very little clearance, but it will fit. I will be putting a different compressor head on to make it work. Here I've got my rear axle out of a 99 Super Duty with 373 gears ready for teardown. I am swapping it to 355 gears as well as putting new clutches in the limited slip carrier. You can see here was the first pattern that I ran with my new 355 gears. This is my first time ever rebuilding a differential, but it was a little deep, I think. So I had to pull some shim stacks out of the pinion. And here's the pattern that I settled with. It looks very good. It's a hair off, but I didn't have enough shims to get it exactly perfect. And I had about, I think, 8 thousandths of an inch backlash. As you can see, I'm measuring that here, which was well within spec. I put the cover on, filled it up with, I did not fill it up with fluid yet. I was waiting to put my aftermarket diff cover on. I got it all stripped down, the shock mounts welded on, and it's ready for paint. I painted the brake caliper mounts and the brake backing plates, and I got it in primer here, and then I was getting ready to do brakes right after this. I put new parking brake springs, hardware, all that good stuff in there, pads, as well as new rotors that have the in-hat drum. I'm running re-drilled hubs drilled to 8x65 for this rear axle so that it would actually work with my current Dana 60 front axle. Then I moved on to the floor pans, which needed some attention because of the rust. I also was working on making mounts for my King Ranch seats. I'm running King Ranch bucket seats from an 05 to 07, or 03 to 07 Ford F-250 or 350 in this truck. I did have to make some mounts and make some new holes and reinforce the floor where they're going to get mounted. You'll see here that I built a bracket to extend and displace the force over a greater area so that if I did happen to get into a wreck, the seat would not rip through the floor and be unsafe. And then you can see here there was some rust right along the weather stripping seal in that channel. And then I also found some in the back of the cab, so I had to address that before I could paint the bottom of the cab and paint the inside of the cab. And it was starting to poke through on the back wall. So I cut out the back wall of the cab about 3 inches tall and started forming new metal to fix that, delete the rust. So I cut out all the rust and then coated everything inside with phosphoric acid to neutralize any leftover rust that I couldn't get out. And you can see here I cut out the entire back wall of the cab, and from driver to passenger side there was rust the entire way across, and the cab corners also had rust as well, so I planned on doing that here too. The center of the cab was not as bad as the ends, but here's a new piece that I bent up on a metal brake to put into the passenger side corner, and then I got that welded in, smoothed out, welds ground down, ready to put another piece over top. I did coat everything before I sandwiched the metal in there, which they didn't do from the factory. So here's the new piece for the actual back wall of the cab. Here's it tacked in a little bit, and then I had to finish weld it all the way across, both inside and out. It will probably need a skim coat of Bondo after it's been ground down, but that's okay with me. Here you can see it, I've got it ground down. It's not perfect, it's going to need a little bit of Bondo, a little bit of touch up, but that's okay. Here you can see I started working on the passenger side cab corner. There was some rust bubbling through, and then there's some rust inside on the inner structure. You got new cab corners from Summit Racing for the extended cab. They're a little more difficult to find. I tacked it in and, it fit up nicely. Got the welds ground down. It will need a little bit of body filler, but, nothing terrible. The driver's side had more structural damage. The inside was a little more rusty, so I did blast that with sandblaster and just clean up the spots. I got the new cab corner tacked in, and then I moved on to working on the floor on the driver's side. As you can see, it needed a lot of attention. There was some rust pitting in that door channel seal area, and down in the footwell, it was pretty bad. So I cut that all out, and I started fitting up a new floor pan. I did build a new inner rocker. I just used a piece of 18 gauge and bent it at a 90-degree angle on my metal brake and put that in. I've got my new floor pan here. As you can see, I was going to plug weld all those holes that I drilled and stitch weld it, fully weld it, but with little tack welds all the way around. And you can see here, it's all welded in. I will have to grind it all down, and I'll use seam sealer on all the welds so that they're 100% waterproof and don't have a chance of rusting again in the future. I started working on my transfer case shifter lever location, so I used the boot to figure out exactly where it was going to sit. I had to do a little work on the passenger side and put a new seal holder in there. And then I took the cab off the frame and got to work on the underside of the cab. I used a wire wheel and a Eastwood SCT contour tool to strip the bottom of the cab. I also power washed it to get all that grease and grime off, and it turned out really nice. There's surprisingly a lot of good metal left underneath. Some places I did need to spot blast with a sandblaster. So here was what it looked like before I was painting it, and then here's what it looks like after I put some primer on it. I just used Rust-Oleum clean metal primer. I did acid etch it with OSPHO, also known as phosphoric acid. And then after the primer dried, I seam sealed all the edges of everywhere that I welded so that water would not get in there. And then I painted it with Rust-Oleum with some hardener in it. I think the color was smoke gray. I then worked on my fuel tanks and battery boxes from Carrot Customs. They got sanded down, and then I hit it with a little bit of acid to etch them, and then used the same stuff that I used on the bottom of the cab, the Rust-Oleum clean metal primer, and some smoke gray paint. I did find some rust in the cowl of the truck, but there's more on that coming in the next video. It was up in the top and it was pretty rusty. I pushed through it with my finger, and also down where the e-brake cable comes through the floor, there were some problems. So I cut that out, and I'll show you guys fixing that in the next video. Thanks for watching, and here's a little bonus of the cab sitting in the shop where it's going to stay for the winter while I work on the cab.